Okay, so Helpsheets. Right. The question is, have you ever had a situation where you're standing in front of a customer and there's something you cannot complete or you cannot do simply because there's an issue on the site? So you've gone, let's say, the typical example that I tend to use, the easiest example I tend to use is, Mrs. Smith goes out and she buys a chandelier or something from John Lewis, right? She gets this beautiful metal chandelier from John Lewis. It's absolutely lovely. It looks great and she loves it. And she calls you and she says, can you come along and fit this for me? And when you arrive, you get there and it's a 1960s build property. And at the center of the room, there is a 2-core PVC cable. It just has the red and the black, and there is no CPC. Or worse than that, you find that it's an old cloth cable and it's just got the red and the black, and there's no CPC. I've got to put my fingers up that way rather than that way, so it's a bit wrong. But you get there, and then you step back down off of the ladder and you say, "Look, I'm really sorry. I can't do this. You need to either change it for an insulated fitting, or we just got to put it back as it was with the plastic pendant that was up there, and we can't do this." So, how many of you have had situations like that? Come on, guys. There's 8 of you out there now this morning, so let's have a little bit of interaction. How many of you have had situations like that? Of course, the other situation might be that you had an RCD that was tripping. You go to a property and you have an RCD that was tripping, and you try to explain about why it's actually tripping. But what you get back from the customer is this expression, as you can see on screen, this lady on screen. It's like, what are you talking about? I don't understand, because it's electrical, because it's electric terminology. And they look at you, number one, they look at you puzzled and confused. But number two, in many cases, they look at you as if to say, you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes to make this a bigger job than it needs to be so that you can charge me some more money. So let's be really honest. How many of you have had a situation like that? Type it into the box. So we've got between a 6 to an 11-second delay. So I'm going to have a sip of my coffee while I am waiting for you. Have you ever had a situation like that? I certainly know that over the years, I have had a number of different situations like that, and particularly back in the days of the old earth bonding and the cross bonding, when it was a must to do it and all of that, and you'd walk into a property and discover that it had never been touched, it had never been done. And when you're trying to explain it to the customer, they don't get it, they don't understand it, and of course, because it's in that moment, because you are there in the property at that present moment in time, they think that all you're trying to do is up the pricing. They think you've just made that up on the spot so that you can actually charge them some more money, or you can make it a bigger job. And they think, well, look, you're only here to fit a socket, or you're only here to do this, or you're only here to fit a light fitting. Just do what I've asked you to do. And it's very difficult then to explain to them that it's not as simple as that, because they don't understand electricity. So what I came up with, what I created, and I believe, I like to believe that I did create the whole concept, because for me, it just seemed like I've spent time doing that kind of thing that I thought, how could I make that freaking easier? And now we're talking about before the days of landing pages and before the days of, easy to put together websites and all of that. So the easiest thing for me to do was to create it on a sheet and be able to hand that sheet to the customer. So that's what I did. I started creating, out of some of the tougher questions that I was asked in the moment, I started to create various different help sheets on lots and lots of different topics. And I would carry them around in a black folder. And then when I come up against that issue, when I come up against that problem, instead of standing there trying to explain in tech terms to a customer who is clueless, doesn't understand, I was able to hand them a document that they could read and understand. And it made life so much easier, because as soon as they got that document and it was written in plain English, I took out all of the jargon, I took out all of the technical terms, and just explain things in very simple language to the customer. They were able to read it and go, I understand what you're talking about now, right? And the interesting thing is, because it was in writing, it was believed. Very strange. You could stand there talking to them, but as soon as you handed them in writing, it was believed. And I think that was partially down to the fact that you had taken the time previously to put this together, to make the explanation, and you hadn't just made it up on the spot. That was number one. Number two, because I wasn't standing there in the moment rushing to try and explain, I didn't have to worry about electrical jargon, electrical terminology, because I'd actually taken time during my marketing time. This is when you should be writing these things. I'd taken my time to actually write it in a way that the customer would understand, removing as much of the terminology as I could, or if I did have to use the terminology, explaining it inside of the document. And then by making sure that there was relevant images, photographs that showed what it was I was talking about, then that also helped as well. So it just made the process of explaining to a customer what the situation was a hell of a lot easier. Okay, now these things grew over a period of time. They didn't all start out being the swish things that they were. They started off being just a very simple document with some writing and some pictures on it. And then I thought, hang on, it's a good marketing tool as well. So let's make it more. Let's make it a little bit more than just a document with paragraphs and pictures. So we tidied it up and made it more sort of, I guess, magazine type layout, and branded, which is important, which leads us to the next or the first part of what you need to understand when doing these things. First thing you need to do is make sure, obviously, the information has got to be in common parlance. We'll talk about that in a moment. But one of the important things in terms of the image is to make sure that it is branded, because the very fact that it's branded makes it look, number one, it makes it look professional. But number two, and you guys know that I don't believe there's a lot of places for branding in your advertising. And to explain that again, you need to understand that there's a difference between advertising and marketing. Okay, so within marketing, your branding, how you appear, is extremely important, whereas in advertising, your branding is not necessarily that important. So let me give you an example. With the leaflets, the very fact that you are just saying you are a local electrician and you're available for work, that's advertising, and that's what you want to do because you want your phone to ring. Nobody cares about your logo, nobody cares about your branding or anything at that point, because what they're doing and what the leaflets are serving for you is to get people who need an electrician in that moment to pick up the phone and call you. Okay, so that's what you call direct marketing. You are putting it out for one specific reason, and that is for people to pick up the phone and call. Okay, in that type of advertising, there is no room for vanity. There's no room for logos or anything like that. That's my opinion. It works for me. It's worked for hundreds of you guys, so it works. Okay, however, there is a place in your business and in your marketing for branding, and that is on your invoicing, on your quotes, on any letters that go out, on the signature in your email, which we covered off in one of the questions on Monday, and here on these help sheets as well. You have to make them look as professional as possible, and by branding them, that helps, number one. But it also helps in terms of advertising too, because if it's got your branding on it and your customer then starts to pass it out, hand it out to friends, to family, shows it to people who come and visit the house. Oh, look, you didn't understand this. Let me show you that. It's got your branding on it. So it's going to help as far as your advertising is concerned as well. So make sure that it is branded with your company branding and company logo, which is the opposite of what I say about the advertising that we do. Okay. The next few things that you've got to understand is that you need to write it in plain English. I've already mentioned you've got to avoid using jargon, and you've got to probably hand it to a 7-year-old kid and ask a 7-year-old kid, does it make sense to them? That's a bit of an exaggeration, but do have other family members read it or other colleagues read it to see if it makes sense to them, because we as the electrician have obviously got our own dialect. We've got our own language to explain things. We are used to terminology. And this is the problem when you're standing in front of the customer. You start talking and using terminology that you're used to talking to other electricians about, that you're used to talking to other electricians online about, or you're used to writing up in quotes and so on and so forth. So you'll start using that kind of language. And some customers, for fear of looking stupid, will not tell you that they don't understand. And that's the problem with standing toe to toe, is because they won't understand, but they won't say they don't understand. And all they'll do is go away feeling confused or feeling that you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. Whereas when you have the time to sit down and write these things down, you have the time to put it into a very simple, plain English language that is understandable by everybody. And then if you have to mention terminology in your written piece, you can then go on to explain that terminology in the written piece as well. Okay, so that people can understand exactly what it is you're talking about, and then that there is no confusion, and that there is no belief that you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. It's clearly explained for them. The next thing that you need to do then is to ensure that you use large fonts and space it out well. Now, the reason for this is because when you hand it to your customer, what you don't want is them putting it down or putting it away, thinking, oh, I'll have a look at that later. Okay, so you need to make sure it's plain English, succinct, but also use large font and good spacing that makes it easy for them to actually digest it there and then. You've got to consider that maybe some people may be, like I am, a bit, what's the word? I need glasses for reading. What's that, short sighted, long sighted? I don't know. But I need glasses for reading. So some people will be like that. They'll need glasses for reading. And rather than step away at that point, they might say, yeah, I'll have a look at that later. You don't want that. You want them to be able to hold it up and get the gist of it there and then while they are with you. That's the main purpose for these things, is to clarify at that point in time what the issue is. So making sure that it's clearly spaced, that the text isn't, you don't have dense amount of text. You may have to have lots of text, which means that your help sheet may go over onto more than one page. I prefer to keep it to one page if you can, but what you don't want is to have really dense, compact text, and you're using really small font in order to fit in a whole pile of information. Okay, and this is why it's worth your while sitting down and thinking about these things. Quite often, when creating any of these things, the same as when you're doing magazine articles, anything, it's not necessarily what you put in, it's what you take out that's important. Okay, so that you leave what is the necessary amount of information to get the message across, but you take out all of the crap. But for the purpose of what you're trying to do, you want to be able to have a document that they can hold out in front of them, look at it, and get the gist of what you're saying pretty much straight away. And for that purpose, use large font, space out your paragraphs and things well, make sure it's not all densely packed, and use images to indicate what it is you're talking about. So, if you're talking about all consumer units and you're pointing out things like what an RCD is, then make sure that you have images in there, photographs in there with arrows pointing to what it is you're talking about. If you're talking about things like, CPCs in cable, then make sure you have a photograph of an image of a cable that has a 2-core, red and black or blue and brown. I don't think it would have blue and brown without a CPC, but red and black without. Well, actually, switch lines probably would in some cases. But make sure that you have a photograph of that and then a photograph of what it should be like, so that you can compare and contrast, and the customer can look at it and go, oh yeah, that's what I've got, and oh yeah, that's what I should have. Okay, so make sure it's spaced well, make sure that you use images and drawings if necessary as well. So again, in some cases where you've got to sketch things out, rather than having to sketch it out in the moment, if you've got a line drawing on your help sheet for what it is that you're trying to explain, where it's, I don't know, about how a switch operates or whatever, then make sure that you actually have those drawings and things on the help sheet as well. Hopefully this is making sense, guys. Can I just see some thumbs, hearts, and smiley faces if this is being helpful so far? And then, of course, what you need to do is make sure, we've talked about the branding, but make sure as well that your contact details are on the document as well. Good morning, Mr. Bartley. Nice to see you there. But your contact details. So again, as usual, large font phone number, email address, if necessary, postal address as well. But make sure, apart from just the branding, your logo and your company name and everything, make sure that there are contact details present on the actual sheet itself. And if it runs over into multiple sheets, make sure that your contact details are on each of the sheets, just in case things get separated. What you don't want to do, or what you always want to do, is you always want to make it easy for somebody to contact you, always. So whether it's a customer that you've already been to and you've left them with a help sheet and they're going to go away and make a decision, make it easy for them to contact you. Yes, they'll have your email. Yes, they'll have quotes from you and all of that as well. But everywhere you can drop your contact details, make sure they're available. And like I said, you never know when they're going to pass that on to somebody. They may have a neighbor who's had the same issue, same problem that you've explained to them. And people like to be the hero. So what they'll do is, when their neighbor comes and complains, oh, I have this, blah, blah, they go, oh, yeah. I had an electrician around a couple of weeks ago and he left me with this. This is exactly what he told me. And then they hand over that document, and that's your details on that document. Who's the next neighbor likely to call? More likely to call you, aren't they? Because they've got your contact details. And look, there is a range of things that you can actually create these help sheets about. Okay, all you've got to do is think to yourself, what are the questions that my customers are asking? What is it I get stumped with? We've got all sorts of things today now, like SPDs and that. We got, why do I have to have a metal consumer unit? Why have I been told I had whatever it is, C1 faults on an EICR. You've got a huge amount of things today. You can have things like, apart from just the electrical things, there's also the structural things that when you're chasing a wall out, why do you need to chase a wall? And believe it or not, you guys understand all of this. Your regular homeowner, Jack that works at an office desk all day long, has never seen the end of a screwdriver in his life, may not understand why you've actually got to chase a wall in order to get a cable behind it, or why you've got to lift a floorboard. So having little brief explanations about things like that you can leave with people so that they comprehend, so that they understand what is required. The difference between tongue and grooved flooring and the sheet flooring, and why you need to cut access holes, or how you're going to do that, how you will cut the hole and plug it after the event, so that they can conceptualize. They can go, all right, so he may have to create a little bit of a damage, whatever, but this is the end result. There's all of these things. Because when you go and you explain to somebody, yeah, I've got to lift up a floorboard, or I've got to drill an access hole in this piece of chipboard, or whatever the case is, sometimes in their mind they go, oh, he's going to wreck my house, he's going to damage my house, blah, blah. But if you can show them a very simple help sheet that says, look, this is a floor that we've done previously, this is the sheet board, we've cored a 100 mil hole here, we managed to get our cables through and our rods through and everything, and then we plugged the hole with whatever item you guys use. I know I used to buy, is it 3M 100 mil plugs? But anyway, that would go in the hole. That's besides the point. But to have these type of things available so that people are now understanding and conceptualizing what is actually happening. Guys, this kind of stuff puts you way ahead of any other tradesman in your area, any other electrician in your area. Because while they're standing in front of the customer trying to explain and go, blah, 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 you are actually handing the customer a sheet or a number of sheets that will actually explain what this is about. Now, we often get the question about should they be digital, should they be handed out in paper, and so on and so forth. I have always been a firm believer that you should have copies of these, paper copies of these, in your vehicle. You should have a little ring binder type tool, like this is the type of thing. It's not the one I had, but this is the type of thing I had, and it had those inserted plastic pockets. You could just open up the clips and put in the plastic pockets, and then fill the pockets up with the different help sheets. You'd have 7 or 8 or 10 different help sheets for properties that in your area need specific type of answers, and so on and so forth. And then it was dead easy to just go to the van and pull one out. And the reason I say that is because 99.9% of your customers, when you say, oh yeah, go and have a look at this link online, they won't look, they won't go, they won't do it, okay? So by actually having the sheet and taking it out and being able to present it to them there on site, then they tend to scan it, look at it. And this is why you have the white, the large font, big print, all that kind of stuff, is that they'll scan it while you're there. get the gist of it. It may even raise more questions, which is great. You can have a conversation and it's opened the door. But to have them on paper with you is a must. Now, can you use them in other ways? Absolutely, you can use them in other ways. But you should have the paper copies with you, definitely. And remember what I said, guys. There's any number of topics you can write these things about. There's a number of samples inside of the toolbox, but even the samples in the toolbox are only there to get your juices flowing. There are the set samples that I've put into the toolbox, the templates that you get. There are other samples that other members have actually created and they've uploaded and put into the toolbox or on the Facebook group, that they're available. But you should get your own creative juice flowing and start looking at stuff in your local area. What are common things that you come across in your local area, whether it's to do with the structure of a property or a sneaky way you've discovered to get a cable from A to B, or how you, if you've got, like I said, lots of 1960s properties and they've got 2-core cable, or you've got the difference between, I don't know, different types of earthing in the property, different types of metering in a property, whatever it is that you have common to your area, you should be creating help sheets about those things. And again, like I said, it doesn't have to be all just purely electrical. It can be about the structures that you're working with as well. If you have things that you're coming across on a regular basis and your customers are like, oh, don't know if you should touch that, don't know if you should do that, and you know how to do it, you know how to work your way around it, then you should create a help sheet on that explains to the customer, look, it's okay, I know what I'm doing, I've done this before, here's a help sheet about it, here's some images, it'll show you exactly how I'm going to go about this, and it's not going to destroy your kitchen, or it's not going to destroy your hallway, or whatever the case is. But questions that your customer asks are a great feed-in for these type of things. Right, other ways that you can actually use them, and yes, you should use some other ways. Obviously, once you've created these things, you can develop them into a PDF. That's very, very simple. If you've created them in a Word document, you can save them as a PDF. Once you've saved them as a PDF, then you can upload them onto your website. Gary alluded to this earlier. He can help you out with this, or depending on who's managing your website. You can save these things in your, once you have web hosting and you have your own URL, you can save these things in an invisible way. I'm trying to explain this properly. It's a bit like having a file storage system on your PC. So you can actually store them on your domain name so that when somebody puts in the URL that you give them, we talked about short link URLs the other day, when you put in the URL that you give them, it automatically downloads it onto their PC as a PDF document. Now, that to me is a good method to use as well, because that's pretty much like handing them something rather than just going to visit it on your website. I hope I'm explaining this well. So you can put these up as a page on your website, just like a blog, so you can send people to it. That's good, that's interesting, and you should do it. So you should have it up there so that they can go and view it. Okay, and it's going to help with your SEO if they're keyword ready and all that kind of stuff. So that can be done, which is fantastic. But then you can also save them as a PDF so that people can download them by just you giving them a link. I'm hoping this is making sense. It's utilizing your website as a storage facility where they can download the document from. And the benefits of doing that means then that instead of them having to go back and look at your website all the time, they've actually got a file that they can use, that they can look at, that they can print off if they want to. And again, when they have a friend or whatever, they can print it off and bang. And again, it's important. That's, again, why you would have your contact details on there and why your branding would be on there. Okay. The other way that you can use them on your website is using them as lead magnets. You can turn them into not just help sheets, but sheets of interest for people. So if somebody in your area is having a particular problem, if you know that many of the properties in your area are having a problem with old consumer units, for example, so they've all got the old MEM rewirable boards with a bit of asbestos backing on them and so on and so forth. If you know that is the case, you can create a lead magnet, a help sheet. That's all it is. It's a PDF document help sheet that explains why they shouldn't have that type of consumer unit and why they should have a new consumer unit. You can then put a landing page up, which basically gives them an outline of what they should be doing to upgrade, and then click here to download this help sheet. Now, the difference between sort of like just giving it away, as in giving them the link where they can grab it, and using a landing page, is that with a landing page, you get the opportunity to capture people's contact details. So if there are people in your area who are considering a consumer unit upgrade and they come across your website and they find, oh, he knows about the type of consumer unit I've got in my house. He knows what I should have. Oh, and he's got this document that answers all the questions that I need answered. So let me download this. You've now got a name and an email address of somebody who's looking into changing a consumer unit, which means you have the opportunity to follow up on that and perhaps make the sale on that. So using them as a lead magnet is a good idea as well. Releasing them out on social media, so using them in your Facebook, in your Twitter, in your Insta, because again, in your Insta, it's an image, isn't it? So you save it as an image file and you post it on Insta. Same thing on social media. You can post it on social media with a brief, caption. If you have this issue, then read this document. So it's good social media content as well. And the other thing is, like I said, with all of these pieces of content, if you can create it in one format, you can create it in another. And the other nice thing about these is that again, emphasize the power of video. If you can create a help sheet, then you can create a video about that help sheet, about the details in that help sheet. And if you've managed to create it as a help sheet, you don't have to worry about scripting or anything like that, because you can literally talk somebody through what it is that you've written down, and you can show them examples on the video. You can take the camera and show the actual type of cable. You can show what it's like lifting the floorboard or underneath the floorboard or accessing over an RSJ or whatever it is that you're trying to explain in the help sheet. In the video, you can demonstrate that. So anything that you can do on a help sheet, you can do on a video as well. Guys, I hope all this is being helpful and making sense to you guys.